you doing, Southern Alberta? This is the Stormbringer bringing you the PZW match of the week on Shaw Television. Superfly Dan versus the silent assassin Chase Patrick, two of the young studs in Power Zone Wrestling, their first ever one-on-one matchup. For those of you that were at the last live event in Lethbridge, you saw Chase Patrick pick his opportunity and attack Superfly Dan after Superfly Dan had survived hell in an I Quit match versus mixed martial artist Sky Ace. Sky Ace is gone from Power Zone Wrestling. He sent a resignation letter into Commissioner Jim Dandy. He sustained a broken collarbone in the matchup with Superfly Dan. And here we go, Superfly Dan versus Chase Patrick. This matchup, Tom, I was able to watch from upstairs at the barn here, Tom. This matchup was incredible. As I stated earlier, two of the young studs in Power Zone Wrestling wanting to take this opportunity to show what they've got. Superfly Dan almost blocked it with his foot on the bottom turnbuckle, but his forehead did meet the top. You can see right there, Tom, there is very little padding on the turnbuckles in Power Zone Wrestling, and if your face or forehead meets those buckles, it's gonna leave a dent, it's gonna leave a mark, and you can see that is where Chase Patrick is able to get the upper hand. The silent assassin has been involved with Power Zone Wrestling now for close to 8 months. He hasn't made a major impact, but he's slowly starting to, Tom. And this matchup with Superfly Dan is an opportunity for Chase Patrick to really stand out amongst his peers. There is a bit of a roster shift taking place within the locker room of PZW. There are some talented wrestlers that are leaving. Some international talent has headed back home, and that is leaving room to shine for guys like Superfly Dan and Chase Patrick. Chase Patrick now using a very, very painful nerve hold, holding down Superfly Dan. Superfly Dan fighting his way back up to the feet, blocked by Chase Patrick. Look at that back cracker. Unbelievable stuff out of Chase Patrick. Goes for the pin. Hooks the leg. 1, 2, and the kick out by Superfly Dan. You can see the form and the athleticism and the fundamentals in both of these wrestlers. Both of these wrestlers are using a sound strategy. You can see Chase Patrick is staying on Superfly Dan like a fly would stay to a piece of rotting raw meat. You can see Superfly Dan trying to do just that, get in the air, use his athleticism. He is a better athlete than Chase Patrick, but Chase Patrick right now has him on the ground, and you can see he's even pushing the referee out of the way, which isn't necessarily the wisest thing to do because you do run the risk of being disqualified. But you can see Chase Patrick keeping Superfly Dan on the ground, staying on him. Well, I use the analogy of a beast staying on a piece of raw meat. I've used it before and I'll use it again. That is exactly what Chase Patrick is doing. Going back to that nerve hold right in the trapezius area, and again Superfly Dan being forced to fight his way up. An eye rake by Chase Patrick. No regard for the rules, no respect for ref Vince, but you can see how he's staying on top. The sunset flip, Superfly Dan into the pin. Chase Patrick, beautiful shot right to the jaw. Nothing fancy, just a brutal shot to the jaw, laying in a big knee to the jaw. Now you can see how methodical the assassin Chase Patrick is. Incredible methodology out of Chase Patrick. A beautiful forearm to that jaw. He's got him in the corner now, setting him up for the Irish whip. Look at that torque. Uses all of his body weight to sustain the momentum. That is unbelievable fundamental wrestling out of Chase Patrick. The pin, 1, 2. One has got to wonder, Tom, if Chase Patrick had hooked the leg, would he have had Superfly Dan down? And again, going back into the trapezius. Look at the facial expression on Superfly. Obviously, that is excruciatingly painful. Great camera work by the Shaw camera person. Incredible facials out of Superfly Dan. You can see how much that hurt. Fighting his way back up now. Lacing into the jaw of Chase Patrick. This could be a mistake. He telegraphs it. Chase with the counter. No, Dan on his feet. Look at the moonsault. Did you see the knees? The Superfly Dan connected to the face of Chase Patrick. Hook a leg, Dan. That is a mistake. If Superfly Dan had hooked the leg and been able to get over to the pin faster, he might have had Chase Patrick based on the element of surprise. The Irish whip sets him in. No, the reversal. The double reverse slides through the legs. Look at Superfly go. This is what I was talking about. Look at that suplex. Go for the pin, Dan. That's a mistake. You've got your man down. Go for the pin. He sets him up. Look at that drop kick. Unbelievable technique out of Superfly Dan. This is what I'm talking about, Tom. This right here is the future of professional wrestling in all of Canada. Superfly Dan and Chase Patrick going at it. Nothing on the line. Just wanting to prove to the audience at home, prove to the wrestlers upstairs, and prove to the live audience just who is the best young stud in wrestling today. Lacing in those chops. Superfly Dan now setting up, running in. Look at that back elbow. Lacing Chase Patrick. Up under the shoulders. Here we go. Chase Patrick is going for the ride. Down right into the knee. Unbelievable stuff. That has got to be it. 1, 2. No, the kick out by Chase Patrick, showing the heart of a lion. I have spoken highly of Chase Patrick in the past, Tom, and I will continue to. I may not be a fan of him as a person, as a performer, though. He is top-notch, and he is one of the young studs in Canadian wrestling, headed to the top. And now with stuff like this, Tom, blatant disqualification by Chase Patrick, obviously feeling the match slipping away, using the cane. This cane is becoming synonymous with the assassin Chase Patrick, using the cane now to lay into Superfly Dan, sending a message to Superfly. He may not have had the Superfly in this matchup, but he may not win the match, but he is going to win the war. The Back to School Nightmare Tour, Tom, begins August 28th in Medicine Hat, 29th Lethbridge, the 30th in Brooks.